Yeah, I haven't made a video for a while. I'm sorry about that. You get into spring and summer and there's a lot of work to be done. Wintertime, you have a little more free time on your hands because of the weather. I'll try to do better, but I can't make any promises. There's a lot of work to be done. But I was going through some stuff and I found this old dry erase board and it still had some writing on it from, I mean, this goes back probably 7, 8 years. I used to go do a lot of public speaking. I'd get invited to come and talk to these patriot groups, whatever. And I came to call them affectionately pitchforks and torches meetings because I figured out, God finally made it clear to me that I was usually only at those meetings for one individual. So there might be 30 or 40 or 50 people there, and they all wanted to take me out and stone me to death or string me up in a tree or throw rocks, whatever, cat calls, whatever, say I was an idiot. And that was fine because there was just the one guy or two people, gal or girl, or guy or girl, that was there to actually hear what I was saying because they needed it. But anyway, I thought this was interesting. I thought I'd just show you this, make a quick video here before I erase this. So America, well, kind of America, meaning the landmass, and you see this division between these two systems within the Constitution. So, if we come back to our origins, like I've said in other videos, we started off with this natural law. Thomas Jefferson expressed it, and he got it from other legal minds like the Locke's and the Grotiuses and different ones like that that came before him. But the law of nature and nature's God, and that's a more complete term because natural law people tend to just think of the laws of nature like gravity and things like that, where the laws of nature and nature's God, that last part emphasizes the divine will for mankind, not just the animal kingdom, not just geology and physics and things like that. So it's kind of all encompassing. So we can see from the natural law, when we followed that pattern of the law of nature and nature's God, we saw this common law, which was common to all men. That's where that originated from. It was the customs and usages that were common to all men that originated out of this law of nature. Now that gets corrupted, and we'll see. So we call that God's law. That also takes the form of what we call the law of the land versus the law of the sea. Ooh, ouch. Which came onto land. It didn't stay at the high tide mark in America. So this has always been kind of at its base called the law of the land. And I hear people use that term today, and they don't have a clue as to what they're talking about. They think that has to do with the Constitution. It does not. The Constitution is a man-made document. That's over here. That's a contract. The law of the land is something that existed before man got their hands on it. Okay, so now this common law, see, I drew an arrow down here, that divided at around 1066 AD. So before 1066 AD, we had this Anglo-Saxon law, God's law, was codified. We see that Alfred the Great, who was kind of the last of the Anglo-Saxon kings, he wrote the Dooms, which are basically a transliteration of the Torah, the Decalogue, the law of Moses, as Moses basically codified this law of God for man. Before then, men had it written on their hearts, like Abraham kept all the law. Well, how did he know what law to keep? God explained it to him and put it through his consciousness. This is what you do. And Abraham walked with God, like Enoch and several of these other. There was these manifestations, whether we want to call them angels or whatever, that taught these godly men this law. Okay, so that's what we had up to, and we see before Alfred there was Malmudius who codified it. Brutus of Troy also codified it. But after 1066, we see William the Conqueror, and because he conquered these common law courts of the people's courts, then this common law morphed into civil law courts through case law. and they had to give opinions and explain why were they making these decisions, because they were the king's judges appointed by the king. They weren't everyday people sitting in a common law jury of your neighbors who knew you in the community, the elders of the community that were wise and understood this law. So that's why that term common law can be a very dangerous term. So the common law equal now today, it really equals more the civil court case law, precedent set by courts, that sort of thing. So we can see here people's courts before, that's a B and a 4, 1066, and then the professional courts with professional judges, attorneys, lawyers after 1066 is what grew. So this becomes our custom and usage. And remember, that's the original meaning of common law. It's the custom and usage of the people. Well, what's your custom and usage now? What's the tradition that you've been following since after 1066? It's these professional courts with professional judges who go to law school, or the inns of court, they used to call them in England. You'd go to these various temples. There was these temples where you would learn the mysteries of the Babylonian mystery religion. Okay. That should be, if you remember that. And that's what we see over here, because this originates from Babylon. So it morphed, this was morphed and kind of usurped. You can still follow this, but you can't do both. I mean, you can, but it's you kind of straddle the line here, and you can't do it unless you understand these two. If you understand these two, then you can kind of straddle and put your toe over here and keep most of your body over here. That's what most people do, like me. We can't benefit from this as much, but we can put a toe in, like as a customer. But we're still bound by those laws when we do those agreements over here, like in commercial transactions. But so that's what's become people's custom and usage, is this system. And it was corrupted a long time ago, and this system was made corrupt by William the Conqueror, who conquered it. So this is all based on contract makes the law. And some of this is obviously got rubbed off, but I think that's saying I can't tell. Anyway, what contract? I can't really make that out either. But we see with civil law, we got man's law, man's will expressed via earthly sovereign power, kings, legislatures. The origins of that are the Babylon, Hammurabi's code, Nimrod of the Bible, all these pharaohs of Egypt, the Caesars of Rome. Today we call it civil law, Roman civil law. Roman law, those are all convertible phrases, meaning the same system of jurisprudence, which goes back to Babylon. So we see under that umbrella, you've got statutory law, you've got treaties, you've got equity is actually kind of floats between both, because they say equity follows the law. So from God's law, we see the best example of an equity decision, because there's no law expressed in the Torah. We see Solomon handing down the matter between the two mothers fighting over the baby. There's no law in the Torah about what to do if two mothers are bitching about over who's the mother of this child. I mean, that sounds absurd on its face. So there's no law for that. So what follows that law then? Equity. So what did Solomon do? He had to devise a way to determine not so much who the real mother is. That's not the question. That's going to be impossible to answer at that time. They didn't have DNA. They didn't, have those kind of tests or things like that. So what Solomon had to do, based on what's just, right, and fair, and according to who? The women or the child? Solomon based his decision on what was the best decision that would cover the best interests of the child. Which one of these two women, regardless of which one's the real mother, which one's going to have the best interests of the child at heart, love the child, care for the child, train the child up? Now, we want to believe that that was the mother. But we don't know that. The Bible does not specify that. And that's one of those huge assumptions people make that you cannot make because you'll twist things. Now, more than likely, she was the mother. But we can't really assume that. The real matter here that was trying to be expressed is the equity goes to the child because the child is the dependent. These two women are grown women, and they're bickering back and forth. So who has the best interest of the child? And Solomon came up with a very clever way to determine that. So that also includes the Uniform Commercial Code, which is kind of, this amalgamation of everything for commerce and all that. But commerce originally grew out of this Admiralty Maritime, the law of the sea. And in the United States, well, when we were still British colonies, the British Parliament and the common law courts, because in Britain they divided up the courts. Here in the United States, we have one court. I mean, we have federal and state jurisdictions, but you go into a state court, that judge can put on different hats. You go into a federal court, that judge can put on different hats. In England, a long time ago, they had separate courts. They had the King's Bench, they had the common law courts, they had the exchequer, all of that. So the subject matter of the law that you were going into was determined which courtroom you went into. We don't do that here. We just have the same courtroom, same judge, and he doesn't even do anything different. It's just the procedures that you follow. So that's why people need attorneys, because they've obfuscated this to such a degree that it's almost impossible for the common guy to understand it, where this system is very easy for the common guy. This requires a bunch of professionals, licensed professionals through the state, okay? So statutes, treaties, all that. So civil law persons, God's law man, all persons are men, but not all men are persons. I've probably put that in other videos. Man is a term of nature, person of the civil law. So I have a video about humans. If you're a human and a person, you're over here. If you're a man, you're over here. It's that simple. Now the question becomes, how do I stop being this human person over here, and how do I become a man over here? That's the great mystery. That's what the gospel of the kingdom of God is all about, because this is what everybody does. They reject God and they come into this, and then they want to know, well, how do I come out of that to come into this again? And that's why this whole series is called, from freedom, you started here, back to bondage, back to freedom again. And this is the history of mankind repeating over and over in this Tytler sequence of from bondage, but nobody ever stops over here. They just keep repeating this cycle. They come over here, they get this for like a brief generation or two, and then right back into this. Because this is all they know. They don't know how the Bible has been so corrupted by both Christians and Jews, because the Jews have added all kinds of laws through their rabbinical, Talmudic, Takanot, and all that stuff, because they're scared to death of violating any of the law. So they add all this other law to it, which makes the law of God to none effect. The Christians, on the other hand, say, well, it was done away with. We just have this now. We're going to obey this. So the Christians are bound. They're waiting for somebody else to come and free them. He already freed you. You just have to make the choice to leave this and come over here into this. The kingdom is at hand. It's never left. Because the kingdom of God has always been with God ruling from afar in your consciousness. And you can self-govern and keep this law. And if everybody was keeping this law, you'd have this nice society where not that things ever are perfect or that no crimes committed, but there's a way of handling this without all this bureaucratic bullshit. That creates more and more of this. Man is not perfect, but this law is all you need. And if you would follow this law and form of justice and court system and all that, you would have a much happier, well-adjusted, beneficial society that is prosperous. Over here, you have divisions in society based on economic. They want to divide it by race. That's a bullshit thing too, just to perpetuate more of this. Well, how you're divided over here is by economic class. It has nothing to do with race. You got a bunch of white poor people, you got a bunch of Hispanic poor people, you got a bunch of Indian poor people, you got a bunch of black poor people. You have poor people. The poor you will have with you always. Then you got people in the middle, the managerial class, because that's the way this system is set up. It's just set up in a managerial system. And then you have the ruling elite on top of that tell the managerial class how to exercise authority over the vast horde of the plebes, the worker, the bottom feeders, if you will, the way the elite talk about it, the useless eaters. So that system is divided by class, not race. And now they want to add race into it because what they're struggling for in this system is to advance from the bottom feeders into the managerial class, and they have to use the elite. They have to get the elite to force that agenda through the rest of the society so that now they can get their will. This was something that was addressed in Frederick Bastiat's little book called The Law. It's called Legalized Plunder. And it's how you use these various, what do they call that, critical race theory, where everything is now revolves around the things about your identity that are from nature, skin color, but we're all the same. I'm very pasty white, but why is that? Because my people came from, probably long time ago. I wasn't pasty white. My ancestors were much darker, but why? Because we went north. We went where the sun doesn't shine very much. Well, what the hell you need a lot of melanin for? See, I just get freckles, and sunburn. But, when before people moved out of Africa and into, to the northern climes, we were much darker because we're all one species. This diversity thing is just the genetic dispositions that God put into us, so that when we go into different areas, we adapt. That's not evolution from slime. That's just common good sense from a designer that built into us all the genetic propensity to adapt. And now we're thinking those things are what's important. It's an absolute absurdity, and it's all about control. And this is the system that controls you. And it throws you carrots and calls them civil rights, but they're really licensed privileges. They're franchises, they're immunities that can be taken from you. Because a sovereign, a God, a Lord, a master granted them to you. And he regulates and controls them. He sets the price at which you have to pay to keep that privilege, license, or immunity. And the actions that you have to take in order to remain in good standing and in his good grace. So you have two systems competing with each other. And this is what everybody talks about when they get all, we need to make these changes. There's no changes to make. You just get the hell over here into this, and you learn what this law is telling you, and you learn it, you practice it, you teach it to others, and this is where you stay. And if you got to dip a toe in over here or a finger in over here to pick a burger out or get some toe jam out of here because you need that toe jam or a booger from this system every once in a while, well, that's fine, but learn how to deal with this, because this is just nothing but toe jam and burgers that you're going to get over here. Boogers. Snot balls. That's all this is. This is just a big, big, big waste of time, effort, and energy, where you are just a bottom feeder feeding a beast. That's it. This is the beast system. This is God's system. And Yeshua, Jesus' brother, called this the perfect law of liberty. Perfect law of liberty. Has nothing to do with the U.S. Constitution. This is the perfect republic. People say, we're a republic. No, you're a freaking democracy within a republic. You don't have a republic anymore because you're not common law allodial free men. That's a republic where you're libera res publica. You're free from things public. Everybody's over here in the public. What is it that you're doing that isn't public? So I thought this was interesting before I wipe it. Nothing has changed. Just like Solomon said too, there's nothing new under the sun. What's been done now has been done before. What you're going through today in America, that's happened before. You had a bunch of transvestite, transsexual temple prostitutes that people would go sodomize in the pagan temples. You had all kinds of things that we do today, and they thought they were fine too. And just like so many people today think those things are all fine. And it actually destroys and weakens and rots the community from within, and then some people wake up, but they don't know what to do. That's what this video series is all about. Again, sorry for not making more videos. I will do my best to try to keep it moving along, but peace. God bless.